So welcome to the Prime Time for Women Book Club. It's a little hairy, but it's also, to me, a big part of what Prime Time for Women's Book Club is about is not only discussing the book, but it's connecting with all of you and with each other. And as you know, a big part of Prime Time for Women's mission is to improve physical, emotional, and spiritual health through positive social connections. So thank you for being here, improving my health all the way around, and being there for each other. It's been really fun doing this book club on this month's book because I reached out to the author and invited her to attend. And she didn't say she could attend, but she sent all these resources that she used when she was researching the book. And so Marcia, who is our facilitator tonight, and I met, and I was able to share the resources with her, and she's going to take it away and start talking a little bit about some of the backstory, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to just share a couple little pieces for some background about the author. I don't know if you guys looked at the author's notes in the back of the book, but she's asked what drew you to these stories. And she says, years ago, I stumbled across these heroic librarians of the Great Depression and the rare blue-skinned Kentuckians, and I couldn't stop thinking about them. I wanted to embrace their strengths and uniqueness in story. I knew it was time for the wider world to experience them in a novel, to learn about, to see the glorious Kentucky female pack horse librarians and the precious blue-skinned mountain folk. And she continues to say, what I most want readers to take away is that poverty and marginalization are not so much economics or politics or societal issues as much as they are human issues. So that's how we'll start. And as you guys all know, the Kentucky Pack Horse Program was implemented in 1935 by the WPA, which is the Works Progress Administration, to create women's work programs and to assist economic recovery and build literacy. So as Bernadette said, she reached out to the author, and I think through the publisher got a treasure trove of information, pictures, just fabulous, which I had the pleasure of looking through. And I kind of thought this would be a good time for her to jump in before we start with questions.
You want me to pull that up?
Yeah, I think this is a good time. I think it's good background before we get into the questions.
Okay, so I'm going to screen share. Don't go away, guys.
I'm so impressed that you can do this, Bernadette.
I know.
You haven't done it yet, but
wait a minute. Yeah, don't get too.
I think it's
too
right.
far ahead of yourself there.
I think you're in the right place, right there.
Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. So,
You click on that exclusive excerpt where you are, because that's what brings up the photos. We're not getting the photos.
Oh, you're not getting the photos. See, I'm seeing the photos.
We're not. I'm not.
You have to do control and then click, I think. Control and click.
Hold on one second, you guys.
Or you don't just click on the blue underline.
Let me do this. Okay, now I'm going to screen share. And you should see this now. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Oh, okay. So everybody say you're a freaking genius. Mm-hmm. Okay, take it away. Marcia, do you want me to just scroll through these?
What? I mean, yeah, if you want to.
So basically, Kim Richardson sent these, and she said that these are photographs, actual photographs that she used in creating the narrative for the story. And she has a lot of quotes here. I'll just read this one. Whoops, hold on, somebody is admitting. The intelligence of the Kentucky mountaineer is keen. All that has ever been said about him, to the contrary, notwithstanding. He is honest, truthful, and God-fearing, but bred to peculiar beliefs, which are the basis of one of the most fascinating chapters in American folklore. He grasped and clung to the pack horse library idea with the tenacity of one starved for learning. And I'm not going to read this all to you, but one of the things that's really interesting is the author talks about the, wait a minute, Marcia, this is not the pictures.
They come right after this. Here we go.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
Setting
any of the pictures you want to show, just, that's good.
Yeah, as she talks about the interesting kind of marriage of illiteracy and folklore and the desire for learning that drove the people of the time and of that place. And this was set during the New Deal, and Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the first people to visit the Kentucky. At first, I think she was the first First Lady / representative of the federal government to visit Kentucky. And this is an actual picture of the pack horse librarians. One of the things that's interesting is all the women received the exact same salary, but they, some of them had their own horses or mules, but if they didn't, part of their job, they had to use their money to rent a horse or a mule to deliver the books.
And I wondered in the book, there were 1 or 2 men, and I wondered if there really were.
There were, towards the end, I think that became, and actually in the end of the book, there, one of the guys was. They lived in a lot of poverty, and many of the people of Kentucky of that time lost their lives to starvation. Marcia, what was the word they called it?
Of what? Of losing?
When they developed the rash, which was a sign of
pellagra.
Pellagra, right. And
I almost said allegra, but that's an
no, between pellagra and the miners that died from black lung, it was a really high morbidity mortality rate.
Oh, there's the tower.
Oh yeah, the fire tower.
The fire tower, yeah.
Yeah, RC worked in that, remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if any of you all had a chance to do any research on the Blue people, but I did a little research on that, and I actually saw some pictures of it, and it's so, oh, this was one of the things they did. I just wanted to scripture cake.
I love that recipe.
Yeah. So religion was a very, very important part of their tradition. But it was also almost cultish in that if you weren't part of the religion, then none of the goodwill extended towards you.
Right.
Librarians often created their own resources to distribute to their patrons, cut from magazines or shared by other patrons with the idea that they were sharing knowledge. Apparently that was, if your recipe or if your tip was included in one of the pack horse librarian's book, that became a point of pride. Your knowledge was being spread throughout the hills. Let's see. These are all different recipes.
I think there's a lot more photos. I don't remember if they're after this.
Well, let me see if I can do this. Yeah, I feel there was more, or maybe they're in the other link. Good grief.
A lot of recipes.
A lot of recipes. And, oh, wait. Okay. So here's some photos of the time. A clever combination, cleverly arranged. They had a lot of baking competitions, which was a big deal back in the day. And this here represents the books that Cussy Mary carried in her bag out to her patrons in the book.
What a great list.
Yeah. So I if any of you are really interested in these, then I would be happy to try to screenshot them for you and send them to you, but you'll have to let me know. Okay, I'm going to end this screen share, and Marcia, if you want to start. Oh, Sharon did make it. Hi, Sharon. Sorry for the confusion.
Thanks for letting me in. Thanks for
Yeah.
sending the other link. I'm not sure what the issue was, but I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I figured it out. It was my fault. I had a meeting beforehand and I ended the meeting, but I didn't end it for all. So it looked like I was still having that meeting. But
Okay.
I'm on board now. I'm not going to do that mistake again.
And
So
Sharon, you're good. We really haven't started. We did a little background information. Bernadette reached out to the author, and the publisher sent her just a load of great pictures and information that she's saying she'd be happy to forward on if you want to see that, which is really great.
Well, I love this book, and I think, you know, a painting is worth 1,000 words, but with a few words, she was able to make the most beautiful paintings. This woman's control of her language was awesome. I could see the landscape. I could hear the people. Wow.
Absolutely.
Loved it.
I agree, Sharon.
Absolutely. And Bernadette, I'm going to ask you also, because I'm going to be reading some of these questions. If you see anybody that's raising their hand or you want to call them out, maybe you'd help me just
Sure.
kind of ask people if they have comments.
Sure.
So I'm going to start. My first question is, why do you think Cussy's father agrees to Charlie Frazier's proposal in the first place? And how do you think he feels after he marries her off to an abusive man? Why do you think that he allowed this, first of all? Like, why was it so important?
Tisha.
He knew he was sick and dying, and I think no one else was accepting of her and her marriage, or whatever, the courting candle. No one else wanted to have anything to do with the blue person, and he was the only one that did. And he probably felt horrible after when he saw the abuse that she endured.
Kathy?
Yeah, I would agree with Tisha. I think he was a good man. He loved his daughter. I think that was very evident. There was nothing in the book that indicated otherwise. It wasn't like he was trying to get rid of her or anything. I think he wanted to protect her. He thought, I'm going to die soon, even though the doctor hadn't, I think, said that at that point in the book. But he knew from the job that he had that he was not likely to live long, and he wanted his daughter to be taken care of. So it was a very human, fatherly thing to do. I think it didn't turn out very well, and he did feel bad.
So much of like parenting, we do these things that we think are great for our kids. Yikes. Then you hear about it later. Angela.
It's also a really good illustration of that generational divide. So just like if those of you have children, we frame everything from our point of view, and his point of view was he couldn't imagine a world where she could actually be taking care of herself without the benefit of a man. He could not envision that. That was not in his frame of reference. And so the only thing he knew, and because he did care for her, that was the only thing he knew to do, is to marry her off. He couldn't conceive of any other possible way to make her safe, even in the face of her saying, no, I got this. Like, I figured this out. I can do this on my own. I'm fine, really. Like, there was no crossing that divide. And I thought that part was really informative, because we do the same thing, right? If you have children, you have to reset your own mindset sometimes to see a new thing that younger generation might know how to do that you can't imagine.
Good point. Liz?
Can I just interject? I did read the book a couple of months ago with my other group. I'm wondering if he, so I'm having trouble remembering a lot of it. I'm wondering if he thought was this the only fellow that had indicated marriage for her, and because of the blue problem that there wouldn't be anybody else, and he wanted to make sure that she was taken care of before he was gone?
Yeah, I definitely think that because of her being a blue, that there was an urgency that he take up anybody who was willing to have her, because he knew he wasn't going to be
Yeah,
around.
I couldn't remember if that was made clear in the book. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's been a while.
I think that is accurate. Yeah.
And that leads to a great segue question, which
But
is.
hold on one second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sharon had something to say.
Sorry.
I just think also his philosophy of life, he was very stoical. He accepted that life was difficult, that they were not going to get a fair deal. And so maybe she wasn't happy about this, but in his wisdom and in his desire to take care of her, so be it. That's what life is. You just don't always get to be happy, because his life had not been happy, and it was just a challenge she was going to have to face.
Okay.
I think that's true.
Karen?
I've had my little hand up here, so I'll get rid of it. I agree with everything everybody said, but her father seemed like a reasonably intelligent man who had a pretty good handle on the blue business. So I was pretty disenchanted with the fact that he had to know that when he turned her over to anybody that wasn't blue, her life was probably going to get worse, not better.
Although his wife wasn't blue, right?
No, she had the gene. Was she white with the recessive gene? I can't remember.
Yeah, so, but she made, and what was he white as well? No, he was blue.
He was blue.
So he had a white spouse, so maybe in his mind, a white spouse could marry a blue. I'm just saying.
I think if I understood it right, they both had the gene, but it can be recessive or not. I think that's what they said, that it came together like the perfect storm of those two gates.
Yeah, but I think the father was also a blue, and the mother had the recessive gene. And
He was, but they also commented several times because he worked in the mines. He was always covered with dust. It wasn't evident. And also, he was a man.
Right.
Yes.
And not preyed upon because, we'll get to that.
I mean, yeah. Well, he stressed many times, or I thought several times, about how important it was for them to stay removed from everybody. That's why I was surprised when he put her out there to a white person.
I think there was a measure of desperation, honestly.
Oh, I agree with that. But I felt, if he truly loved her, I was having trouble with both of those scenarios.
A lose-lose scenario.
Yeah, and that leads to the next question. What do you imagine life was like for an unwed woman, white or blue, at that time? What was life like for an unwed woman?
I think they were sexually harassed and victimized, raped all the time. And actually, you can actually go and read some of the real stories that did happen. And rape wasn't really a crime.
Right.
It was, if you got raped, it was your fault, baby.
And you're a woman. That's what's supposed to happen to you.
Yeah.
Right.
You're there for the man's pleasure or whatever. Yeah. It was definitely, I found that disturbing on so many levels. And especially after the doctor was able to validate that it was a condition, and people they didn't care, even when she was white at sometimes when she was taking the medicine. Kathy Cutler.
Yeah, also they didn't have the educational and economic opportunities that men had. And so the thing that really was interesting to me, and this showed up in the last book too that we read, is that this library these book women, they were women. I mean, usually jobs were not set aside for women. And so this was a real boon to women living in the hills, especially single women, and they were supposed to be single based on what the rules were.
That way they could get raped without anybody having a hissy fit.
Well, that might be, but the thing is that they, it gave them jobs, and Eleanor probably had her hand in that, and probably Frances Perkins, who was the Department of Labor first woman ever a department chair in the U.S. government, Secretary of Labor. They probably had their hand in that, but women didn't have economic or educational opportunities. So that was, if you were a woman then, you were poor. If you were a single woman, unless you were born into a rich family, you were poor, and no opportunity to not be poor, really.
Nobody in the Kentucky hills was rich.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And you look at Cassie, and I mean, she was an intellectual, or if she would have had the opportunity to be, she loved to read. She had a great vocabulary. She was imaginative. She had many, many good traits, but she loved reading, and really didn't have, well, like you said, a lot of people didn't have opportunities to really pursue anything in relation to that intellectually.
I think an aside to that, or related to that, is when Queenie goes to Philadelphia, Cussie can't even imagine ever leaving the hills. Like, and she's a big thinker for that space, and she's like, what? I mean, Queenie was so brave, and she couldn't wait to just say farewell to those Harriet and whoever the other lady was. But she opened, in her own way, she opened another horizon for Cussie.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. Anybody else before we?
Well, the only thing I would add to that about the women being a single woman, because until even many years after that, well into the middle of the century, women were viewed as, for all of those reasons that you state, more as property. But it's ironic that at those times, they didn't want married women doing that job, and they didn't want married women as the school marm. That was a single woman, because once you were married, you were having babies, and you were considered now the property of your husband.
And you had to be home doing his bidding.
And you had, or raising the kids or whatever, taking care of the homestead. And in a good relationship, that might not be a bad balance, right? Like, if there was a mutual respect there, that might not be a bad balance. But that also made women vulnerable when there was not a good relationship.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
And think about how much harder everything was. Can you imagine doing laundry then? That process of laundry? I mean,
anything.
really?
Diapers, yeah, anything. Yeah.
So
it had to be a true, but I believe you have to believe that there were good partnerships. There were relationships there were mutual respect, where they agreed to work in tandem together to survive and to keep their kids healthy and keep their kids alive. So there was, it was just that when there were good people involved, it probably worked okay. But when one or the other parties was not working from good intentions, there was a lot of vulnerability, primarily for the women, because they had no power.
So one of the things I thought of a while back, we read Grandma Gatewood's Legacy, and this was the same time frame and in the same area of the country. She was born in 1887 and lived until 1973. And for those of you who didn't read the book, she hiked the Appalachian Trail. She was the first woman to through hike the Appalachian Trail. She did it without telling anybody, in Keds. Didn't carry a sleeping bag. She had a little jean drawstring thing that she wore over her back. And she went off. And when she was interviewed by reporters, they said, hiking 2,000 and some miles and by yourself with, and isn't that so hard? And she said, it's nowhere near as hard as my life, raising 11 kids, being abused by my husband, hospitalized near death multiple times. She said, this was nothing. And so I couldn't help but think about that whole legacy as I was reading this book.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. Cussie obviously has to deal with the loss of many loved ones in a very short amount of time. How do you think she handled her grief? How do you think she dealt with it and kind of moved on? I mean, I would say her work. She delved back into the best therapy she had for herself, which was helping other people, offering the gift of reading and books and trying to really personalize what she gave to people that they asked for. She remembered, she would look for things. I think her purpose is what kind of helped her through a lot of her loss and grief, that she had to just keep going and do these positive things.
Kathy Cutler?
Yeah, I also think that just where she lived and who she was and the type of life they had, she was used to that type of thing.
Right.
Her mother died, her father was on the verge of death all the time. You never knew if the mine was going to cave in. They all got lung cancer. She was blue, you know, I mean, it was like at some point, I think that when one stacks on the other in terms of those types of bad situations, you become a little inured to it. Not that she was a very empathetic person, a very caring person, but I think that you either learn to deal with it or you just roll up in a ball and give up. And she was not a giver-upper. So
I thought another way that she dealt with the grief was just to be in nature. And I actually think that's something that if you read any of the stuff in the newspapers on the national level or even worldwide, there's been during COVID when there was so much stress and so much suffering and pain, people have turned to the natural world, and that brings comfort. It can bring a healing, a calmness. And so I think even the way the author wrote and described the sound in the trees or the rippling of the water or the bluebells on I mean, there was such detail in that. And I kept thinking that for that author, she was finding meaning in nature. And I thought that's how she was creating Cussie to experience that too.
And if I could add to both what Kathy and Bernadette says, I think you're right, Kathy. So in that time period and in that lifestyle, death was just so much, everybody was so much closer to death. Children died, babies died, women died so much more frequently because you just didn't have the benefit of doctors, hospitals, medicines, and there was so much poverty. And if you think about being in nature, if you spend any time in nature, really spend time in nature, there's a lot of life and death every single moment. Like you're just in it. And death is not one of these things, like death is not the absolute worst thing that can happen. For us, we're so removed from it. So the death of a loved one is often the most like unbearable pain, but it's actually part of the natural process. We just have removed ourselves. So it's a good reminder to maybe look at that and go, well, it's just part of the process. So we don't like to do that. We don't like to be in that space. It's uncomfortable, but I think people who are more landed and people who are more connected to nature are much more, they can endure it. They're just more connected to it.
Yeah, more accepting, more comfortable with it. Out of all of these losses, which one for you was the most difficult to read? Which loss?
for me, it was the father, but I'm not sure if that, I thought about that because I saw that question and I thought about that, but I'm not sure if it was because it was like the last one in such a whole series of horrible deaths. I mean, Henry was awful. Here was this wonderful child. I loved him. And, so I think the father, because it just one on top of the other, and that's when I cried. I didn't cry for the others. I felt sad about them, but when the father died, even before he saw his daughter happily married, I just thought that was really sad.
Tisha May.
Yeah, I was thinking of Henry and what's her name, the Moffat woman,
Angelina. Yeah.
Angelina. Henry and her death were the ones that got me the most. They got me the most because she was so, it was full of life, and she was so giving to Cussie to touch her, which startled Cussie because no one ever touched her. And Henry being so young, and it was just sad.
He was so sweet. He was such a sweet young thing.
For me, Angelina was the toughest, partly because she had shown such kindness and acceptance to Cussie. But more than that, she had been a blue herself. She didn't even know it. She had the recessive gene, and her husband did. And then they had this blue baby. So when she died, she knew that she was giving life to a baby that was going to face the same sorts of discrimination, and she wouldn't be there to protect her. That one really, that got to me.
Sharon,
Sharon?
you lit up. Did you?
Okay, I thought all those.
Okay.
Did you say Karen or Sharon?
Sharon.
Well, you both lit up, so either one. Sharon?
Me.
Sharon?
Oh, let's just forget it. Let's just go on to the next one.
I found all the losses heartbreaking, but what angered me is at the end, after she got married and they arrested her husband, that was just like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like,
Agreed.
no, there is no way. There is no way this is happening now.
Yeah.
That was gut wrenching.
Okay, now Karen.
Oh, well, I really didn't have anything to say, except that, you know, I found the sheriff interesting because he was a man of the law. And there was a time I can't even remember what part it was, but he sort of supported her because it was the law. But then
Saved her from being raped, for sure. Remember
right,
that scene?
right. And then because he was a man of the law. But when it came to her husband and him marrying somebody who wasn't white, that became a big deal again. On the death issue, I thought it interesting because Cussie and her father didn't belong to the church because they were sort of exiled, maybe because of their blueness. I'm not sure, but she managed death and life very well without the church, and I thought that was an interesting aspect of it.
Yes, and I have to say, all the deaths were painful, but like Kathy, the father, and I think it's because you could feel her as she looked out, heard them coming and looked out, and she knew. She saw them dragging the, whatever the thing is called.
Yeah, I wanted to say
She knew.
the part of the book, even more than when her father died, was when the fellow miners showed up at her wedding and said, "Your father asked me to stand in his place."
Oh, yeah, that was,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
That was a beautiful moment. I have to say that I think that's what kind of pissed me off about like what Sharon's bringing up. It's like, you're like, oh my God, this is it. They're going to find their happiness. They found their person. This is beautiful. And then you're like, oh no. And then it's the miners and everything's good. And then like, I would just like, as a literary critique, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, I think it was piling on to make Jackson get the crap beat out of him. I really do. Like if I was going to like edit that book, I'd be like, okay, look, you already scared, she was already been through enough. You scared the crap out of us. That was good. You should have stopped there. And they could have had like, some other difficulties, but that just seemed like, I don't know. I would have tried to change that if I were her editor. I'm just, that's just.
But there is a story. I don't know if you, the last name is Love, in Virginia, where a white man married a black woman in Virginia in the time and close to the same time frame.
Yes.
And he actually served prison time.
Yes.
And then when he got out, he had to live out of state.
Correct.
And there were times when he snuck back in to be with his wife. I find it so amazing that people could have been so cruel. But then I think about how people, just based on who they love, then I think about how gay people have been treated in our culture and in other cultures around the world. No, you can't love who you love. You got to do it my way. And we're just not good at looking at other perspectives.
Yes.
Tisha.
I don't understand how she was able to marry the abusive guy. He was white, and that was okay.
Ah,
Because they changed the law, and you were speaking to this, Karen, the sheriff was all about law and order. So
Right.
he was upholding the law, and something happened. There was a passage where they talked about they had just passed a law in the state that said, no,
Yes.
it became officially illegal to marry outside of your
So
race.
between the two weddings, that's when.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So he was enforcing that not arbitrarily, but it was like, okay, he didn't look into his own conscience. He was just like, okay, this is the law. I got to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, no matter what.
And what was so upsetting about that was the glee he took in beating her husband, breaking his leg, continuing to kick him after he was down. It was like he was enjoying it.
Yeah.
That was
Too
just.
much.
I agree. Too much.
And in those days, entering into a prohibited or interracial marriage in Kentucky, miscogenation was a misdemeanor that could result in incarceration. And we see these racial tensions attempt to sever Cussy and Jackson's relationship. And you guys probably know that the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that this law was unconstitutional. Here's a little quiz question. Do you know what year that was?
1963, I don't know.
Close.
73.
No, it was before
In
then.
between those two.
65.
Keep
64.
going.
68.
Oh,
We win.
Googling. Are you Googling?
No, I'm just,
19,
What do
I'm
we
just
win?
trying to get in between all the numbers you guys have mentioned.
1967. Isn't that unbelievable? That's when that was declared unconstitutional. 1966. You're all close. Anyway, okay. Moving on. To me, this is a great question.
no one told me there would be a quiz, Marcia.
I know.
Okay.
I didn't
Well,
And if you fail, we kick your butt out.
Uh-oh, I'm gone. I'm out
I
of
thought I'd just spring it on you just to wake anybody up that was like thinking about something else. Okay. So when Cussy, this is great. When Cussy receives the cure for her blueness from Doc, she realizes there's a price to pay for the white skin, and the side effects soon become too much to handle. If you were in Cussy's shoes, would you sacrifice your health for a chance at normalcy? And more, to me, even more interesting, if there weren't any side effects, do you think Cussy or you would have continued to take the medication?
I wouldn't say it was normal if you're vomiting all the time and have these horrific headaches and you might appear normal to others, but your life wouldn't be normal. And I don't think Cussy could have kept her book route. And I think that was more important to her. And I thought it was interesting, though, that she bought her father's line that it was playing into vanity. I thought in some ways it was playing into her own safety and her own acceptance within the society. But her father just thought it was vanity.
Yeah, but she was never going to be accepted anyway. She went to the 4th of July thing and she was white, and they still would not accept. She'd have to move out of the hills to be accepted. And she wasn't about to do that. But to answer the question, I've said before when that if, maybe a little over the top, but I've said if I were Black in this country, I think I'd wake up every day angry. People who are blue or Black or whatever, different, gay, are treated differently and their lives are in danger sometimes. And would I take the pill if it didn't have side effects? I might, and I'm reading now the Vanishing Half. And it's about a Black woman. Part of it is about a Black woman who passes as white because, she did not want to be Black in our society in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I mean, it spans time. And I get that, You know, we don't treat people that are different, and that's not the right word, but
Even my black friend Robin Morris told me that, and I think Robin's my age or maybe a little younger, but she said growing up, her sister was considered the pretty one and she was the ugly one. And she said we looked a lot alike, except she was lighter skinned. And she said my sister was treated better, not just by white people, but within their family. And I mean, that has got to be so incredibly painful to be, even by your own people, be treated differently based on the amount of melanin. Karen.
I've often said if I were black, I'd probably be in jail, because I would just get so angry having to deal with what they have to deal. But having said that, because Cussie was such an intelligent girl, and when her father died, I think if there were no side effects, I believe she would have stayed on the medication, would have been white, just to maybe move on in her life. I think she may have taken a trip to Philadelphia to visit, and that may have changed things. I don't know. I mean, she wasn't, when they did go, where did the doctor take her to? Was it Louisville? Somewhere.
Lexington.
Yeah, I think it was Lexington. She was overwhelmed by all the noise and everything. So, maybe city life wasn't for her, but I tend to think given no side effects, she probably would have stayed on it. I really do. It's unfortunate, but that's the way I think she may have gone.
But later on in the book, she came to accept herself for the person that she was. One of my favorite
Right.
parts was that Mr. Taft, who told her that God saved the best color, blue, for his home, meaning the sky. And he referred to Picasso's Blue Lady. And she started to look at herself in a different way, in a different image. That part lightened my heart.
And also Jackson didn't really like the white. He loved her for her. He loved her for who she was, and he was like confused by the whole white thing.
The best part of it, the best part of the book for me was when Jackson says he doesn't see her for a while and she thinks she should have never spoken her truth to him. And then when she finally does see him again, he says, by the way, I want to apologize. I can't possibly know what it's like being you. I don't know that from the inside. I should have never weighed in. And I was like, yes, that's so
and yes. And what he says is, Cussie Mary, I've been wanting to apologize for my words back on the trail that day. I had no right telling you how you should feel. No right claiming knowledge on things I could and will never feel. I've never known harm or exile because of my skin, not felt the lash of leather whips or angry tongues because of it. Forgive me. I was damn foolish, blind, because I only saw a smart librarian, a fine lady. I see more now. I see your burden and grief, and I am sorry for it.
that was like my favorite passage in the whole book.
And I had one too. She kind of lost it with Jackson at one point, because they were talking about it, and she said he couldn't know the load I'd carried as a blue, the scorn and hatred and gruesome marriage. How dare Paul call me vain? And now Jackson, how dare he too? No, Jackson, love it, you're wrong. There's nothing wrong with your world, a world that wants only whiteness.
Yes.
And I thought that was a pivotal point for her, because she had really, addressed it at that point.
I was going to ask Marcia if it's okay, just if any of you had any sort of experience of being the other in your life. If not,
I for sure have. I'm Jewish. I grew up in a little town outside of Pittsburgh, and there were probably 3 Jewish families. We had this little synagogue that we went to on Sundays for Sunday school. And at some point in elementary school, my sister and I were discovered as not being like all the other kids. And there were some black kids in the school too, but something I'm assuming that parents said about Jews was so harsh that we started being called names and yelled at. And one summer on the playground, my sister and I were playing this ball type game, and these kids started throwing rocks at us. and said, "Kikes, get off the playground." And my sister and I had no idea, what do we have cooties? You know, what is up with that? We never heard that word before, and went home to my parents and told them what happened. And the next day, my father called a realtor and said, "We're moving. We're going to another town. We're not going to stay here and live with that." That was really, really weird, really hurtful, and really strange.
And that's interesting, Marcia, because I was raised a little farm girl on a farm outside of York, Pennsylvania. And when I graduated from high school, went to school in Philadelphia, and I roomed with 3 other gals. And we got along really good. And one night, the one girl was saying about how she said she was Jewish, and I didn't give it a second thought. But then she said they weren't allowed to move into, there were certain nice developments, I guess, that were made out in Seattle. She was from Seattle, Washington. And because they were Jewish, they weren't allowed to buy into that development. Now, that would have been in the 1960s. And that was a shocker to me. I had no idea. And when you're not exposed to it, you don't know about it. And I just could not, to this day, I can't believe what people do to each other. I can't believe what we do because of somebody's color, because of their sexual orientation, because of their religion. I can't believe that people that own mines would do what they did to the miners, force them to live like they did, and force them to work and behave like they did, make them buy products from their store, keep them in debt all the time. I can't believe that kind of cruelness.
I know. And Kathy, I don't know if you remember the year, I don't know, Jews were not allowed to join Fountainhead Country Club. And it wasn't until I don't know what year, but I remember when I learned that, I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, in York, Pennsylvania, we had 2 clubs. One was a country club and the other one was the outdoor country club. The Jewish people had to go to that one. They weren't allowed at the other one. And that makes no sense. It makes no sense at all.
In 1975, when I was a senior in high school, I was dating Matt, and I was going to go to our prom at Fern Park High School. And I knew this guy, Don McFarland. He was a big time athlete at Annapolis High, which was the black high school. And he called me like the week before his prom and said, "My date can't go. She's sick. Will you go?" And in 1975, it was a little tough to do the whole interracial thing. And I said, "I don't know, let me check with my boyfriend. He might have feelings about that." So I call Matt and I say, and Matt says, "You ought to go." I said, "What? Like, I'm your girlfriend." He goes, "Yeah, but if I was him, I wouldn't want to go to my senior prom by myself." So I told Don I would go to his senior prom with him. And we went to this restaurant called Wagon Wheels on Route 2 through Florida Park. And
That was your first mistake.
yes, we've gone to Wagon Wheels. But we had a reservation. We get there and we sit inside next to the hostess stand. Like 9 people came in and were seated beyond us. And they came in after us. And I'm sitting there and Don's not saying anything. And you know, I'm not used to really keeping my mouth shut. And I'm like, "This is ridiculous. We have a reservation." And he's like, "Shh, just calm down." Just like, no, I still think we would have sat there all night. I got up and I made a hissy fit that really embarrassed the heck out of him. But we were seated, but our service was terrible. It took twice as long. And I think it was his norm. He's like, just chill. This is how it is. And I was like horrified. It was like my first real awakening how it might feel to be black. Or even to be bit with a black person. They're probably thinking that white girl hanging out with a black guy, you know, whatever. It was eye-opening. Anybody else have a story to share with that? Okay, Marcia.
Okay. So what do you think happens to Cussie, Jackson, Honey, and the other inhabitants of Troublesome after the story ends? Imagine you were Cussie. How would you feel leaving Troublesome for good? I'll weigh in on that. I kind of thought I mean, I think what I'm supposed to think is that it would be really hard for her to leave. And I would imagine in some ways that's her home. She's, developed a life and friends and loves the countryside and knows the trails and Junia and her whole life. But on the other hand, I think I would feel like excited to maybe go to a better place and a happier world and start a new life with the man of her dreams and their beautiful little honey girl. So that's kind of what I thought.
Well,
And I agree with you because her reading was a way of escaping before, and now she had a chance to actually escape in real life and start over with someone who actually loved her and a daughter. I mean, what an awesome way to begin a life somewhere else.
Well, clarify something for me because I was going to read back and I didn't. After they married, didn't they have to move to Ohio? They had to leave Troublesome
He
Creek.
had to leave.
Did.
He had to leave Kentucky. And he would sneak back.
But they left, right? They had to
Who
leave.
was punished? He had to leave.
He did.
Right.
At the end, it said that they were looking at moving to Ohio. That was what was coming. That he couldn't be there anymore. So they were looking at moving to Ohio, but they had not done it. As it ended, he was sneaking back. That was where it was at the end. But they were looking at moving to Ohio because there was a bookwoman route for
job
her
there.
there. Yeah, yeah. I don't, though I hate to say this, I wasn't very hopeful because, I mean, she's blue, the baby is blue. You move from Kentucky to Ohio, she's still blue, I mean,
Yeah, but maybe not too much longer. Was there a cure for the blueness?
well, they said there that in the notes that the cure didn't come until like the 60s or something. Or she put that pill in just to make the story more interesting, but that didn't happen in the 30s.
Right.
And also, as there was more intermarriage, I guess it died out more and more. They married because they couldn't marry other people. They were limited.
I guess I imagine that some of the towns and cities were a little ahead, a little more progressive. Maybe that was wishful thinking that life might be a little better somewhere else for them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was Queenie's story, right? I mean, she moved to a city because she was going to have more opportunity. So maybe the hope there was that if they moved out of the hills and the hollers, there would at least be an opportunity to go to a more open, some level of a more open-minded place.
And as hard and as difficult as Queenie's life was, there were a lot of African Americans, a lot of Black people from different places. And she, throughout this book, it was like, I couldn't believe how many times Cussie said, I'm the last one, I'm the last one. And then actually she's not the last one, she was raising maybe the last one. I think what a sense of isolation to be the only, to not have somebody else understand from your vantage point what it feels like. Karen.
Well, I thought I understood from the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there in that area of Kentucky, that there was sort of an isolated blue group there. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking that, and there were prejudices against them, like they were like, I don't know, Satanists or, weren't they couldn't be part of God because God was against them or something. But if they moved somewhere else, I would think the higher probability would be that people would say, wow, that's really unusual. So there must be something wrong with them, but they wouldn't hold them at the same level of hatred that they did there.
You could hope. Yep.
And just to get away from that Harriet bitch, God.
I was going to say, I would never had trouble blowing Troublesome Creek ever.
Yeah, exactly.
God.
Oh.
Tisha, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was interested in the Fugits, I think that was their name, the real people that lived in Kentucky, the blue people, and how they had a protector there, and they needed a protector to keep them from the press and everybody coming at them. And
That was later, yeah.
yeah, it's interesting to me.
Well, you know, this always being against each other for one reason or the other. I remember clearly with Robert's father's family being from up there north of Rome and his mother's family being from Sicily. Those people don't respect each other or get along, and they're all basically Italians, and they're all the same color and everything. I mean, you just had this ugly hatred for things that aren't exactly the way you are. And that's why I get so upset on the political side and the social side of things, where, you know, if you're raised a certain way, you believe these things. So I think it's important for all of us to take a look at, you know, what we were raised as we were brought up, and then look at the rest of it and try to figure out, you know, are we on the right path or are we not? Because if you stay in that same dogma, that's where you stay.
It's taught. Prejudice and ignorance is taught. It's not natural to you.
Yeah, I mean, even Robert will tell you when he was in high school and grade school and whatever, you know, being Italian, he was, I forget, what do they call him?
Well,
No, it was worse than that. They have another name. What is it?
Dagos.
Dago. That was it, you know.
yeah, I was called both. Yeah.
And if you go to New York City, they were, you know, so unliked by so many people when they came in, you know. And it's just, you know, they were all white, but they were all different.
Yeah, but they didn't like the Irish either.
No, the Irish couldn't do anything
Every
with
day
in this country.
They were a bunch of drunks. What the heck?
The Irish did become the cops for whatever reason.
It was
And
the
they-
same
they
with
built a
every
canal.
new wave of immigration. The Chinese were treated badly. The Chinese who built the railroads. It always happened with each new wave of immigration, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah.
And they're being treated badly again because of the virus.
Again, yes. Yes.
Saw a thing on it on TV tonight.
Marcia,
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know if you have other questions, but I did get a movie trailer that I thought maybe we could end with.
Oh, that would be great. I just want to say one quick thing, and that is I also wonder if in some way the survival instinct, like if you look at animals,
Yeah,
wolves don't want to mess with horses, or there's like,
Right.
who's going to win here? Who's going to kill who?
mhm.
Like that there's some weird primitive survival thing
Yeah.
in
It goes
people.
back to that. It goes
Yeah.
back to that. Mhm.
Interesting.
Before we go to the movie thing, could I just say that I agree with Angela, is that there seemed a lot of piling on. There was a lot of sadness and horribleness in this book, you know, and understandably, because that's how times were in some ways. But I could we end maybe with just people saying what uplifted them? And just that one scene after they got married where all the people, you know, these people are spread out all over. She rides for miles on this horse in horrible terrain, you know, and they all, I don't know if all of them came, but so many of them came
Yeah.
to her wedding and stood outside. And I was so, that just made me feel so happy, you know. It uplifted me and there were points in the book that were uplifting, and I don't know if Marcia you want to do that, but I just think it would be nice if people talked about what uplifted them about the book.
No, I think that's a great idea, and I would say along the same lines to see the kindness and humanity in these few stellar evolved human beings within this other swarm of people that were just so afraid and backward and cruel and narrow-minded and bigoted and racist and everything else was lovely. Like, who was the woman that, what was it, Angeline, that held her hands?
Angela,
Were pulling and said,
Yeah.
doesn't it feel good?
yeah.
The hands don't know that they're different. This feels so good. I loved that.
Well,
That was uplifting,
I think Loretta also did that.
Mhm.
It was
When she
Loretta,
takes the little
the older
baby
lady,
in.
did that.
Yeah.
And Cussy didn't she the other remarkable thing about her, aside from being, you know, an intellectual and against all odds, she just kept she never stopped. She didn't buckle down to the bullying of Harriet and Eula, and she tried to meet people where they were. So, what was the father's name? Devil John. What was his name? Whatever, you know. And he was like, "Don't bring any more books because my family has stopped working and they need to work," you know. But she didn't just. She found a way to meet him where he was, and I think that is such a great lesson for today, because so many of us are in our own silos, and I don't care who you are, what your political beliefs are. You're in a silo. We're all in an echo chamber, and the challenge right now is to stop being in that echo chamber, step outside and say to other people, okay, you know, if the common goal here is to find unity or peace, I need to reach deep down and figure out how to cross that divide. And I think that Cussie was she did that with everybody. She figured it out. Henry's mother, you know, right? She didn't want to have anything to do with those books, but then she figured out how to reach him. Devil John figured out how to reach him. She just always she never gave up. And I think for me, that's the most uplifting thing. Against all these great odds, she just never, ever, ever stopped trying to find that place to connect. She wouldn't give up.
And then, Angela, that Devil John showed up for her too at the end when the sheriff was beating on Jackson. He showed up for her.
He did.
Yeah.
I think I liked when Jackson, when Cussie throws out the courting candle and it turns out it's Jackson. And she's like, I don't need you. I don't need you. And I can't remember his exact verbiage, but it was so, wasn't only tender and loving, it was so human. It was like bridging that gap, sort of like what you're talking about. And I thought to myself, they would be great words to say in a marriage ceremony.
And I just have to say real quick, Angela saying that about getting outside, walking outside your door. Maria Shriver has a Sunday paper that's delivered online. It's fantastic. You can sign up for it. And she calls it the open field. And she constantly is encouraging people to meet in the open field. I love that.
That is good.
Well,
So
isn't there a thing that Rumi, I just want to say, isn't there a thing that Rumi said about there's a field or something somewhere, I'll meet you there? I can't remember the words.
Well, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
It's a Rumi quote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could, you know, as you read the book, there were highs and lows and everything else. And sort of along the same line that Angela's saying, I felt that the empathy and the caring nature of Cussie just was balanced the whole book out. It was manageable then with all the sadness and everything that came with it. The way she handled things, the way she handled the sadness, the way she addressed everything, I thought she was a great character.
And in the end, she was repaid by those people attending her wedding and showing how much they appreciated her.
Yes.
Even Eula. And Harriet didn't like that. That Eula kind of came around.
Okay, guys, it's just about 9:30. It was so great to see you. And I'm going to play this, see if I can screen share this again. Let's see.
Night, everybody.
Good. Well, and we can, whoopsie, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Heard of it.
Is it this quote? Oh, you're going to play, okay.
Troublesome Creek have to scrap for everything during the Great. Thanks to Roosevelt's Kentucky Packhorse Library Project, they've got traveling librarian Cussie Mary Carter. I'm gonna open the windows to your world. Cussie's also the last of her kind. Her skin a shade of blue, unlike most people. Not everyone is keen on her family or the library project, and a blue is often blamed for any hint of trouble. To see you awaiting, If Cussie wants to bring the joy of books to the hill folks, she'll have to confront prejudice as old as the Appalachians. Inspired by the true blue-skinned people of Kentucky and the brave Kentucky Packhorse Library Service of the 1930s, The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek is the story of raw courage, fierce strength, and one woman's belief that books can carry us anywhere, even back home.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to
Hello,
share
I'm
that.
Susie McCullough, and I'm the branch
Oh, wait a
librarian
minute.
here
Let's-
at
hold on.
Riverside
Hold on.
Library. We have a book club here where we read books and discuss and talk about them. And we like to pick good.
Her voice.
From Kentucky.
No one invited her. No one invited her.
Yeah, what's she doing here?
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can get rid of her. Oh, there. Yeah. So anyhow, yeah, the authors or the publisher sent that, so I thought, oh, it would be a fun way to kind of.
Really good. Good job.
Tisha,
Thanks, ladies. And I just want to say to Angela, thank you. And tonight when I end this, I'm going to hit end for all. Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're a fast learner, Bernadette.
Thank you.
Each time.
Thank you for persisting, and thank you for creating all these points of connection, Bernadette. You're a shining
Thank
light.
you.
Yep, you are.
Good job, Marcia. Good job.
well,
Great job.
Good job.
Oh, wait, next month, whose turn is it? Angela, you
It's
don't know.
Tish's. It's
Okay.
Tish's. Yep.
One of the thing about this book club is everybody's empowered to lead a discussion. So, you know, if you stick around, you get to pick a book and lead the discussion too.
What is the book? What's the book? I didn't get the thing.
Tisha, tell us about the book.
Her.
What?
It's a mystery. It's called His and Hers by Alice Feeney, Feeny.
Can you put it in the chat, Tisha?
Okay, how do I do that?
Okay, so at the bottom of your screen,
Oh, I see it.
click on that, and then you just hit enter and everybody can see it.
Okay.
I tried to do that before. So you just tap chat and then type what you want to type.
And then you hit the enter button or return button.
Okay.
See, aren't you all so tech savvy?
It's not doing anything. I'm hitting it, but nothing's happening.
Okay, tell me, I'll type it.
Look to the right of your screen.
Right. No, nothing's there.
Doesn't say chat over there when you
Yeah.
click.
You have
When
to put your cursor on the screen.
It's at the bottom too.
Put your cursor on the screen.
Down at the bottom where it says to everyone.
When I put my cursor on the screen, it shows up on the bottom.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I clicked chat, but nothing's happening.
Okay.
Over to the right, it should give you a place. It says to everyone, type message here.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
And after you type the message, what do you do? After you type the message, what do you do?
and just hit enter.
Enter like you would on a regular email or anything.
Oh, just hit enter on your keyboard.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't know.
And then it'll go up on the side of the screen and you can read the chats.
There we go.
That's mine. Hello.
Kathy yeah, Kathy, you rock.
Good job.
I am so tech savvy.
You are awesome.
You did it.
Thank you.
Life has not passed me by yet.
Yay for
Yay for
Kathy.
Well, if I can learn it at my age, you all can learn it.
Yeah. Oh, there. Yeah.
Liz, what is your age? You notice I didn't say how old are you because you're young, baby. What is your age?
How old do you think I am?
I don't know.
You told us one time, and I forget. It was older than me, so it was.
So old, so you forget.
I used to love the
I'm higher
carnivals.
level than you, Kathy.
I'll tell you in a minute, but I used to love the carnivals because there'd always be a guy that would say, guess your weight or your age. Well, I could always guess my weight or pretty close. So I'd say age and they could never get it.
They always say younger.
Yeah, they'd always.
I was 86 in January.
Oh,
Oh,
God. I love that.
Here she is,
Awesome.
multiple book clubs, keeping us straight on the chat. You go.
I have an older half sister who's 97.
Oh, God, that's great.
I hope these genes are coming from our mother because we don't share fathers.
Me too. Me too.
Happy belated birthday.
Are you allowed to share any of this extra stuff that you got from this author, Bernadette?
You know, Marcia and I had a big conversation about that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't actually say I couldn't, so she thought maybe I could. So if you guys,
For my own personal,
yeah, if I send it to you guys, can you look at it as members? It was sent to the book, the Prime Time for Women book club. So if I send it to you, if you used it but didn't send it on, then I would feel better about it.
And Bernadette, you can deny that you sent it.
But I just want to say, I don't remember where. I did a little research on my own, and those photos are out there. Not all the recipe stuff, but the photos and a lot of that information is already out there somewhere. I can't remember where I found it. So
well, the photo of all the women in a row on their horses is how I first got acquainted with the whole issue. It was on Facebook and they were promoting the book Woman of Troublesome Creek. And then from that one, I went to Giver of Stars, which is a similar story, but it's not racial like hers because there's no color.
We read that. Remember, Bernadette?
yeah,
Yes, we read it last year.
yeah.
So who do you think will play Cussie in the movie? I'm assuming, I'll bet you there'll be a movie. Who would be Cussie?
Oh,
Brad Pitt.
Cussie.
Tom Hanks, who's in
Not
that?
anybody much prettier than him, so you could be right.
George Clooney, I don't know.
I mean, Cussie's a woman, you guys.
I know. I'm like, what do you? Oh, is this the alternative version?
Why not? Why not?
People would really freak out over that. God.
I
Okay,
mean, Jennifer Lawrence would be perfect, but maybe it has to be somebody younger.
I was thinking Emma Stone, maybe.
who's is that the one who played
The Help.
Hermione? Who played Hermione?
Miney.
Hermione, what book is that? I mean, what movie?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Oh, I
Oh,
never.
Emma Watson. That's Emma Watson.
Yeah, she'd be good.
And I think Jennifer Lawrence would be good too. I think
Yeah, I do too. Okay, guys, lovely to see you. See you.
Goodbye. Thanks for letting me join.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.